Is God really telling us to vote for an avowed sexual predator? Jonah Goldberg and David French in the corner at National Review weighed in today on this. Is this really an actual question? I mean, well, we're going to address it anyway. Mr. Goldberg first. This is actually on Tuesday at the corner, the National Review Online. Now, Eric Metexas is a prominent writer on the inviolability and sanctity of Christian conscience. You'll see when we're done how the irony of that resume. Metexas has said in the past, quote, "We can always caricaturize Christianity, but here I'm speaking of true Christianity, and the tradition of true Christianity has always been that true Christians have understood the idea of freedom of conscience. Have understood the idea that actual faith is something that's between an individual and God, and this is something that must be safeguarded, and you cannot force it. If you understand this fundamentally Christian idea that faith cannot be forced, then you understand that you have to protect it. That you have to allow people to freely choose what they believe in and will not believe in. That is central to the Christian project." Close quote. Now here comes the irony. Metexas supports Donald Trump. Do I really need to say anything more? Well, I probably not, but I'm going to anyway. Now, I certainly understand the arguments against Hillary Clinton, and I am not much interested in second-guessing what his conscience dictates, although I am to the extent that he's eviscerating his own conscience if he's truly a Christian, because that affects his credibility as a Christian scholar and theologian. Yes, it does. But last night, Metexas tweeted this. This would have been Monday night. "Evan McMullin is a good man, but in this election he is a fig leaf there to assuage the consciences of religious people. God is not fooled." And no, Evan McMullin is not there to assuage anything. Evan McMullin is an actual conservative. And we are under no obligation to vote for somebody who doesn't stand for what we believe in. Metexas made the same point at greater length in the Wall Street Journal just last week. His basic argument is that Hillary Clinton would be worse than Trump because of her policies. If I thought Donald Trump could be trusted to fulfill his promises or be temperamentally fit for the presidency, although a lot of his promises are on policies that are anti-conservative, so I don't. Even if he meant what he said, he couldn't achieve it, and a lot of what he says are not good ideas. They're liberal ideas. But I digress. Bottom line is that argument's not compelling because Donald Trump is not lesser. He's just as evil as Hillary is. I mean, we all know that argument by now. The relevant point here is that this is a prudential, worldly question. It is a question that is answered through reason and evidence, not faith. Metexas is making a prudential argument about a political contest and then leaping to the conclusion that God is on his side and won't be fooled by anyone whose conscience, never mind reason and facts, leads them to a different conclusion. I wonder if Metexas remembers that scriptural passage that says that our thoughts are not God's thoughts. Our ways are not his ways. I mean, if Donald Trump won the election on November 8th, clearly that would be God's will. That doesn't mean God is on his side. God allows all kinds of injustices that seem like injustices from our point of view, but our point of view is limited, and God's point of view is ultimate and unlimited and infinite. God uses bad people to accomplish his plan. I mean, God is not limited. God can use good people. God can use bad people. You know, any set of circumstances. God is not foiled. And what Metexas is trying to do here is pigeonhole God. He's trying to put a Make America Great Again trucker ball cap on Jesus Christ. Doesn't work that way. Remember, my kingdom is not of this world. Render unto Caesar what is Caesar's, render unto God what is God's. Now, Goldberg's not a terribly religious person. I am. But I would like to think that I would like to think that I would not claim to know God's will on such a temporal matter, and then go about using my certitude as a cudgel against my co-religionists. And that is what I find so galling about Metaxas's argument. I always thought that the role of conscience in Christianity is to treat it as something of great value and importance. Yes, as Catholics teach, it must be rightly formed through reason. A poorly formed conscience can lead to poor decisions. But conscience also speaks to us from a plateau above mere reason. And understand, there's no reasoned argument for Trump either. In Metaxas's formulation, conscience has been reduced to a kind of virtue signaling vanity and maybe the sin of pride. Put not your faith in princes. Don't listen to your conscience because God wants you to vote for Donald Trump is a weird and arguably blasphemous argument coming from anybody. But it is downright bizarre coming from the moral biographer of Wilberforce and Bonhoeffer. Next up, David French, also at the corner at nationalreview.com yesterday. Now on Monday, Christian writer, Cuction writer, Eric Metaxas took to Facebook to explain a tweet, now deleted, that said, Evan McMullen is a good man, but in this election he is a fig leaf there to assuage the consciences of religious people. God is not fooled. After Jonah Goldberg's post in response at the corner, which I just shared with you in the previous segment, Metaxas said this, quote, "The following article in National Review Online by the estimable Jonah Goldberg misunderstands what I meant in my tweet, but that is more than half my fault because I can now see how the tweet might be confusing. In other words, you're too stupid to understand what I really meant. I was making a perhaps obscure theological point having to do with the idea that fig leaves in Eden were used for a good reason, but ultimately they didn't do the job. Not in God's eyes. In other words, Adam and Eve knew they were naked, so they made aprons of fig leaves. But God made clear that that was not sufficient. Blood needed to be shed." Oh, is this really the analogy that he wants to use? Blood needed to be shed? Is that really what you want to say in the context of Donald Trump? He says. So he supplied them with the skin of animals, innocent animals that were killed. So of course I support people following their consciences, but I'm implying, and effectively I realize now, that the fig leaves of voting for a third-party candidate seem to do the job, but fail. How do they? That depends on what you suppose that job to be. That's really the question, isn't it? Now, if you consider or define that job to be stopping Hillary Clinton, well then no, they're not going to do the job, and nobody is asserting that. Nobody who is voting for Evan McMullin or Gary Johnson or whomever is asserting that that's going to stop Hillary Clinton. What it is saying is we're not going to vote for either of two liberal Democrats. That's the job that it's doing. And in that, it does quite well. Thank you very much. But I realize this came across as, oh, wait a minute, that the fig leaves of voting for a third-party candidate seem to do the job but fail, as in Eden, God is not fooled. But I realize this came across as though I was saying these people were trying to fool God. And on some level, Adam and Eve were. But I don't think people voting for Evan McMullin are, so my tweet really failed to do its job, as tweets seem rather often to fail, and I'm sorry about that. Also, using a fig leaf is a kind of fussy religious act that fails because it implies that we can do something that we cannot. God has to do that something. And I was implying that religious people were voting for Evan McMullin to feel good about themselves, which I do think in many cases is true, but that's a far cry from them trying to fool God. I'm sure this has failed to explain my dumb tweet, but I thought I owe Jonah and all the others who were baffled by it some kind of explanation. My apologies for the confusion. Blessings. Yeah, he used 3 S's in blessings, which is very serpentine when you stop and think about it. Talk about a Freudian slip. But see, that whole supposed explanation is fundamentally wrong. When I vote for a candidate who actually reflects my values, I'm not trying to cover myself. I'm trying to advance a particular point of view. Even if it's a minority point of view, as it most definitely is this election cycle. And when that candidate is a third-party candidate or independent, it's quite obvious that I might just be playing the long game, trying to build something from small beginnings. I mean, I can't speak for everyone on the never Trump, never Hillary side, but I haven't been exposed to much fussy religiosity, but rather real anguish combined with a genuine search for a candidate with better and more decent values and convictions. Freedom of conscience, Mr. Metaxas. Let me break this down very simply so even a Trumplican and conservative can understand it. I'm not voting for Trump because he is unfit for the presidency. I'm not voting for Hillary because she is unfit for the presidency. I'm not choosing the lesser of two evils, not because I'm fussy, but in part because I don't want to contribute to either person's power, but rather to their ultimate removal 4 years from now, in addition to the fact that one is not more or less evil than the other. They're both equally evil. Moreover, no one has explained to me with any particularity or sufficiency which one of the candidates is in fact the lesser evil. Because you can't. Instead, like many Trumplicans and conservatives, Metaxas lapses into the kind of doom is upon us rhetoric that is frankly tiresome because it's fear-mongering. It's a left-wing tactic. I would think that those on the right would be immune to such tactics by this time. Guess I was wrong. For example, in a much-shared Wall Street Journal piece arguing that Christians should follow the example of Dietrich Bonhoeffer and William Wilberforce and ally with disgraceful politicians to accomplish virtuous political goals, Metaxas says this, quote, "It's a fact that if Hillary Clinton is elected, the country's chances to have a Supreme Court that values the Constitution," that presumes that it values it now, and so totally drenched as the entire legal profession and over 2 centuries of unconstitutional judicial review mentality, that I really don't even think that the term Constitution and Supreme Court belong in the same sentence. But I digress. And the genuine liberty and self-government for which millions have died is gone! Like 8 years of Barack Obama hasn't accomplished that quite thoroughly. I mean, think about it. I mean, it's one of two things. Either Barack Obama's 2 terms have already destroyed the genuine liberty and self-government from which millions have died, or 1 additional term of Hillary can't destroy it if the 2 terms of Barack Obama haven't. It's one or the other. But this idea that 8 years of Barack Obama hasn't done this, but 4 years of Hillary would? Again, how is Hillary Clinton worse than Barack Obama? Why isn't it enough that Hillary would be Obama's 3rd term? Why do you have to try to... I mean, that's bad enough as it is. Why do you have to try to pretend that Hillary makes Satan look like Jesus Christ? That's fear-mongering. And it's manipulative and it's tiresome, and screw you. It's gone, not for 4 years or 8, but forever! Here is a reality check and a news flash from Mr. Metaxas. That condition already exists. We already passed that Rubicon 4 years ago. Hillary's not going to make it any worse than it already is. It's just delaying the possibility of resurrecting the Republic by 4 years. But then that was guaranteed. You know, Trump mania is guaranteed. That was guaranteed back on May 3rd when Ted Cruz dropped out of the Republican race and Trump became presumptive nominee. Now, all we know for certain is that Hillary is going to have a chance to appoint a single Supreme Court justice, and that's contingent on the Senate resisting Merrick Garland before Hillary's inauguration, which I wouldn't count on if I were you. I wouldn't count on that. We don't know about any others. If she's a 1-term president, and she will be, one way or the other, either she won't live through her term, or her health will have deteriorated so much that she can't run for a 2nd term, or she will just be easily defeated in 2020. But the next 8 years will likely be far more crucial for the court, the High Court, the Supreme Court, Olympus, than her 4. But to Metaxas, it's a fact that the court is gone forever if she wins but 1 term. Then he moves on to national security with this outlandish statement. Quote, if imperiously flouting the rules by having a private server endangered American lives and secrets and may lead to more deaths, if she cynically deleted thousands of emails, and if her foreign policy judgment led to the rise of the Islamic State, all of which are true, won't refusing to vote make me responsible for those suffering as a result of these things? That doesn't even make any sense. He's talking about things that she's already done and things that have already happened before this election ever took place. How does that make us retroactively responsible for these things? That doesn't even make any sense. No, Metaxas. The fact that I refuse to vote for Trump does not make me responsible for those suffering because of ISIS, especially when your preferred option is a man who explicitly and intentionally threatens our core alliances, has no real strategy for opposing the global jihad, has advanced policies that range from the criminal, targeting terrorist families, to the nonsensical, Exxon will fix things, to the purely and destructively idiotic, let's take their oil. Some of this man's other brilliant policy ideas include more nuclear proliferation, I thought that was bad, including permitting the Saudis to get nuclear weapons. Indeed, is that a good thing? Oh, it's to balance the Iranians. Oh, terrific. Nuclear war in the Middle East. And that isn't even involving Israel yet. Or who knows, maybe the Saudis and the mullahs join forces against Israel. Sound like a plan? Yeah, from the jihad's point of view, certainly. Indeed, David French has been in briefings in years past where the precise ideas Trump has advanced in this campaign are mentioned as the exact American policies that our own intelligence services believe could trigger horrific military conflict. And by horrific, I'm assuming he means nuclear conflict. Yeah, let's nuke ISIS. Yeah, let's use nuclear weapons on the territories of two internationally recognized sovereign nations, Iraq and Syria. Iraq is a vassal of Iran. Syria is an ally of both Iran and Russia. Yeah, nothing could go wrong with first use of nuclear weapons near Russian military forces. Nothing could go wrong there. Or I guess the right way to phrase it is, what could possibly go wrong? Now, Metaxas used to be a capable guy. He used to be a great writer, and he used to be a person who did much good in this world. None of those things are true anymore, because he threw them all overboard, sold it all out, sold out his Lord. He denied Jesus as Lord and swore allegiance to Trump as Lord. That's what Eric Metaxas has done. But he's also not a constitutional scholar, nor is he a national security expert. And do you really have to be either one to recognize the foolishness of Donald Trump? Metaxas doesn't have a special window into Donald Trump's soul. In other words, he's wish casting. Yet he's purporting to tell Christians that Trump is so clearly better than Clinton that you're like Adam and Eve covering themselves with fig leaves if you vote for a different candidate who actually reflects the values that Eric Metaxas used to claim to stand for. Objection, counselor. You are assuming facts that are not in evidence. When Eric Metaxas votes for Trump, and when I vote for Evan McMullin, we will both be voting for losing candidates. The difference is that my choice will be fit for the presidency and possess the character and temperament to lead the greatest nation in the world, or the formerly greatest nation in the world. His choice will not, and that is precisely why it is no longer the greatest nation in the world. I will be calling on Christians to support a candidate who possesses real integrity. Eric Metaxas and all Trumplicans are and will not. He's throwing away his vote on a corrupt, opportunistic demagogue. And I am not, and neither should any of you.